Welcome back to The Void. We're doing another episode. We are back, baby. Grant Pardee here with you, along with Jack. Hi, Jack.
Hello. It's been a while.
It's been a minute. This is a movie podcast where we cover movies when we damn well feel like it. You know, Jack of Old Games is ongoing, consistent content. You can't get enough Jack. Sonic Weekly for myself, that comes out every 7 days or so if you can't get enough of me. But when we join forces together, it's a whole special thing. And I would like to do more in the new year, in 2024. I think you would too. So maybe we will. But, we'll see.
Yeah. Right now, when we get together, it's a saga.
Yes.
And that's really what we're going to be here looking at today. Because what we wanted to talk about originally was a select couple of Batman movies.
Right. We did Jurassic Park, and you had you had an angle on Jurassic Park, and then it was like my turn, essentially. And it was like, well, I have an angle on The Dark Knight Rises. And you're like, oh, I haven't seen The Dark Knight Rises. And I was like, well, don't worry about it. I mean, maybe check it out. And you're like, no, I haven't seen any Batman movie. I was like, oh, well, that might be tricky. You're like, I'm going to watch every Batman movie in the amount of time that it takes to watch every Batman movie back to back. And then you chain smoked over like the last week or something, all of the Batman films. You downloaded them in rapid succession. And I think you went in chronological order.
That's right.
Of order of release.
Yes. So we started with Batman 66. We're skipping the 40s, and we went through to today. As long as it got a theatrical release, Jack watched it.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to cover all of these movies with short little, our thoughts. We're going to basically, it says it in the episode title, probably, but we are going to review every Batman movie ever, with the small caveat of that, yes, only the theatrical movies. And yeah, we're not going to cover the serials. The serials are weird curiosities. They're not nearly in the same league as the movies, that are full productions and more modern, starting with 66, which even that,
but 66 is an oddity on its own. But
it is an oddity, but it does feel more like part of the proper Batman canon. So we're not going to talk too much about the serials. And then we're only going to talk about the theatrical movies because there's so many direct to video or direct to streaming Batman movies on Max or on Amazon Prime or whatever. Not to mention, like, there's tiers of that. There's like the teen movies, the adult movies. We could talk about every Batman porn parody. And then there's also the like Lego verse of Batman. So, okay, those are the parameters. And then, we'll give a list of what our favorite ones are. And we'll see if we see eye to eye, cheek to cheek, face to face, or if we are Siskel and Eberting some of these.
One could say there's a reckoning coming.
There's a reckoning coming, and I'm debating about letting the cat out of the bag early just to give it a tease. But we've seen each other's rankings, and I'll just say that there is a surprise for Zack Snyder fans with how high one of his movies featuring Batman is on your list.
I'm going to preemptively say this. I'm not a Snyder stan.
Your list begs to differ. And then I think we also see the Burton films a little differently. Based on how we
definitely see the Burton films differently.
So let's get into it. Let's start with Batman 66. This is, of course, the feature-length comedy action adventure movie starring Adam West and Burt Ward, and the four villains: Joker, Catwoman, Riddler, Penguin. I'm not going to list every actor because I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Sure, I could say yes, Burgess Meredith is the Penguin, Cesar Romero is Joker, but I'm blanking on Riddler's name, and I want to say it's Lee Merriweather, who plays Catwoman in the movie.
I believe it's Eartha Kitt.
No. Eartha Kitt is season 3 of the show. In the movie, it's like Julie. It's not Julie Andrews. It's
Julie
I wanna say it's
Newmar.
Julie Newmar is the Catwoman from most of the series.
I am going to have to edit this so much.
Oh, this is gold. This is gold content. Let me check. So this is why I didn't want to say that. Yeah, it is Lee Merriweather. Why did we doubt me? Lee Merriweather. Okay, so here's a unique.
You are the
Lee
Batman
Merriweather
expert here.
plays Catwoman and Kitka, but she did not play Catwoman in the show. So there were 3 Catwomen over the course of the 60s Batman, 3 seasons in a movie.
So my understanding is this was made after season 1 of the show.
That's
and
right.
It was
season 1 was
so
a huge
popular.
hit.
They did this.
Exactly.
And coming off of a childhood where I'd seen animated series beyond, I'd experienced some of the Nolan verse in theaters and seen a little bit of the Snyder stuff. 66 hit me like a freaking brick. The extent of what I'd ever seen from it was like YTMND memes in the early aughts, where you have like Batman running with the bomb set to yakety sax or whatever, and like, oh, this is silly. I had no idea how silly this was.
Wow. Yeah, I guess part of the narrative too is like you have somehow been living under this rock, like from my perspective, which is like I don't know how you like. It's totally plausible, and I think for myself, I saw the Star Wars movies a little later on, and so I kind of knew things going into that. It is interesting too. So for me, I remember watching the '60s Batman episodes on the early version of the FX network and really liking it. But of course, by that time, I had also been exposed to some Batman media and knew vaguely that the '60s show was campy. Everybody says it's campy. That's the word. It's like you have to figure out what camp is and learn camp, sort of appreciate and then you either like it or dislike it. Okay, so the movie is particularly, I would say, it's particularly bonkers even for the standards of the show, because it opens with the UN turned into essentially pixie dust and such. Whatever, who cares the plot? The 4 villains team up.
They spend most of the movie on a submarine shouting pirate things at one another.
Yo-ho! Forward torpedo tubes, prepare to fire!
They do. And it is strange. It does. I think the movie has one of the better Riddler solves too, when they're piecing together that the 4 villains are working together. They had it's always fun when the Riddler
bonkers solve.
Yes, it's so silly.
It's something like,
and they're at sea because there's the boat thing, and we see the bat shark repellent, and they're like, sea Catwoman.
Yeah, C for cat, like Catwoman. And, this line, it's kind of funny. It must be the Joker.
Right, yeah. And I forget even how they're like, huh, and a shark. It's kind of like a fish. The penguin must be involved. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but it's like that.
I think even Gordon gets in on this, like, ridiculous-ass solve.
Yeah. It sets the tone for the movie, yeah.
Yeah, it really does. This is a movie I didn't know, I guess, going in, that a fair amount of the sort of tongue-in-cheekness with Batman 66 was that he's not actually really that great at what he does. Just like wild crap happens around him that saves his ass repeatedly. Like there's this solution that happens where there's a torpedo that shoots at them, and they're on a jet ski or something, and they have no solutions left available to them. They appear to die, and then the next time we see them, they're just like, wow, that dolphin, it sure was brave of that dolphin to jump in front of us and just take the full hit from the torpedo for us. That dolphin sacrifice will be remembered. What?
Yeah, it's very it's almost like it's kind of like a British sense of humor. It's very sort of dry, wry, silly, deadpan. It's that sort of approach. And incidentally, it was the '60s show was inspired by how ridiculous and poorly produced and constructed those serials are. People would watch those serials in the way that Riff Tracks or Mystery Science Theater watch old movies and laugh at them. So that's what they were doing with the 40 serials. And so the 60s show was an attempt to essentially create that vibe of like, this is a ridiculous, stupid, goofy, can you believe what the kids are into kind of thing. And that it's like, adding a pop art adult sensibility to it. That's kind of where like the sense of humor is coming from. And a lot of it comes from the same writer. It is Lorenzo Semple Jr., who writes not only the movie, but the majority of the series, as I recall. A lot of this, by the way, I'm just going off of my memory.
Oh, I will take you for your word at most of the behind the scenes stuff.
But I'm looking up his Wikipedia too. I am, I guess, the Batman expert here. But I'm also relying a little bit on Wikipedia. He also wrote 3 Days of the Condor. So a talented writer, definitely, and all produced by William Dozer. And then it's really just a matter of like comedy from the 60s, and it's a silly comedy. And so how does that age? Like the bomb bit, I love.
I love
he's
the
looking
bomb
around.
scene.
Bomb scene is the standout, right?
Yeah, the bomb scene is the standout. There's some of the random saves hold up. They're very funny. I think when I walked away from this, my main thought was this is one of the first times I've watched a movie from the 60s this far out and genuinely laughed at it. Like, I was shocked at how well this held up. Like, there's some not great things in there, but the comedy really held up. I really liked this movie when I walked away from it. It was not what I was expecting at all, but I really enjoyed it.
Nice. It is it's kind of it's a movie I like to fall asleep to. I tend to doze off while I'm watching it because there's a lot of, feels like padding to me. A lot of just like there's a couple memorable bits, couple memorable moments, and then as you mentioned earlier, it's a lot of weird pirate puns and things like that are just sort of like content.
There's a lot of extended gags around like a improbable device that exists. There's a lot of people standing around scheming and talking funny because that's what they do. And yeah, it does feel like padding.
Speaking of speaking in funny ways too, we have quite a bit of the Batman Catwoman romance in this film, although she's under a alias of Kitka that he does or does not see through.
Speaking of poorly aged things.
Yeah. Why is it poorly aged?
Well, I mean, it's, for a starting point, this is very much a movie of its moment in the time of the 60s because Kitka is coming here from the Soviet Union, and there's this whole thing about, is that okay that there's a Soviet reporter here and trying to talk to like the most successful capitalist guy that's ever capitalist?
Right.
And the romance also makes virtually no sense throughout the entire movie, but that's par for the course for a slapstick comedy, even today.
Yeah, I suppose so. For me, the comparison for Batman the movie, Batman 66, is a movie like Casino Royale, the send up of James Bond,
the David Niven one.
Yep, which is also slapstick, dry, wry, silly. It's throwing lots of dad jokes at you at a rapid pace, and it's also a subversion of a hero archetype that hasn't really been set up yet at that time. Batman the movie is a parody of Batman that comes out before modern Batman. And similarly, Casino Royale it's debatable whether or not it counts as I think it mostly does not count as an official Bond movie, but it's very much about James Bond. So overall, Batman the movie, I'm trying to, should we give these things like some sort of arbitrary ranking? I feel like I'll lose track of what I rank things and then it won't make sense in my final ranking. So I guess maybe we'll just give like a summary thought of like, it's a movie that I enjoy watching while half awake. It is like a Sunday afternoon. Maybe I'll take a nap kind of movie to me that makes about as much sense if I'm sitting in the theater watching a re-release of it or, dozing off every other scene. It seems to hold together about the same. So I like it. I like the colorfulness of it. The opening sequence with the spotlight, it's fun. It's got a character, it's got a swagger, it's got a point of view. I like all those things, and I like that about this movie. And I'd like to see an equally silly parody of Batman today. So I like it.
I think I look at this movie, and this is probably the only time I'll ever say this about anything Batman, as almost comfort. It's like one of those things where you had a bad day at work and you want to come home, have a bowl of soup, and watch something that makes you laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that would be Batman 66.
All right. Well, then is the longest gap between Batman movies. Because between Batman 66 and Batman 89 is Batman nothing. There was cartoons and comic books, but as far as films, that was it. The public, as far as we knew, Batman was a fad that happened around the time when the Beatles were the Fab Four and not yet artistes. It's a Cold War relic. He's a old fashioned character. So Batman '89 is a reinvention in the style of the '80s graphic novels from Frank Miller, mostly Frank Miller. You could maybe say Alan Moore, and then also pulling from. You could say from the Bob Kane, Bill Finger comics. You could say from the Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams comics. But I think they were also pursuing their own original vision for the character, which was created by Tim Burton along with Michael Keaton, who plays the character, and then the screenwriter Sam Hamm, of course, the producers John Peters and Peter Guber. Like there's a lot of cooks cooking for Batman '89. It's a big studio project. Prince is doing the soundtrack. Why? Because he's also on the Warner Brothers record label. Well, what's his connection to Batman? The Joker wears purple and Prince is purple. That was the extent of the logic from the Warner executive. And yet it makes sense. Honestly, I think it's a point of pride that the Batman series had Prince and a soundtrack by Prince, a whole album, Batman, Prince. And the tracks are pretty good. I mean, I like them. Electric Chair, woo. Bat Dance, yahoo. Batman '89 is one of my very favorites. It's definitely a comfort movie because it came out when I was but 3 years old. I didn't see it then. I saw it, I don't know, a few years later in the '90s. Probably saw Batman the Animated Series first and then saw this. And it made a mark on my personality that scarred me forever to always be interested in Batman. I like his silhouette, and boy, the movie knows what to do with the silhouette as it introduces the character in the opening thing with the rooftops, and he opens his cape up, and it's like, whoa, this is a very different Batman. This is a scary Batman. And for a long time, this was held up as the definitive comic book movie. It took until the 2000s.
Until they rebooted it again.
Until they rebooted it again. And I think during the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, people were like, okay, the best comic book movies are Spider-Man 2 and Batman '89. But it was always Batman '89. It was always hanging out there. Jack Nicholson, untouchable. Nobody could ever do the Joker. They should never, ever bring back the Joker because of how much Jack Nicholson nailed it. That was kind of the prevailing wisdom, which just sort of shows how that changes. It's also very dated in some ways, but it is a movie that also, I think, similar to Batman the Animated Series, tries to be a little out of time anyway. It's got some of that 1930s, 1940s film noir style for the men's fashion with the coats and hats and the automobiles that we see. And the production design is another thing that everybody mentions about Batman '89 for good reason. Anton Furst designed the very imposing metropolitan structure of Gotham. We only see a couple of blocks of it. It's this huge soundstage, but kind of looks small on the screen because it's oh, there's the theater again. Oh, there's the museum. there's that alley from the opening. But it is what it is. And other knocks on the movie are like, well, Batman is like, he doesn't do, like, he's the suit. He can't turn his head. He can't really fight. He doesn't really do much. The first thing he does is he shows up and gets shot. That's true. He does fight. He does do detective work. He figures out the Joker's plot. In some ways, I think the movie maybe is hindered by, another common criticism of it is that the movie doesn't have a very tight plot. It's a little all over the place with a couple of Joker capers, and then it ends with a twist reveal that in this movie, in this version only, the Joker is responsible for the death of Bruce Wayne's parents directly. As a young Jack Napier, he was the one that shot them in the alley, which was similar to uh, Spider-Man having organic web shooters in the Sam Raimi movies, as where there was this like hand wringing of. I guess for a movie it makes sense, even though it's not comic accurate. So if it's not comic accurate, we can't really like it.
You're allowed to do what you want to do with these kind of movies, but it felt a little bit like, oh man, we have to give Batman some internal conflict. Like, Joker did a real bad that's real personal to him. How's he gonna feel about it? And I guess the answer is he's gonna hang him off a building with a gargoyle strapped to his feet. But
yeah, it's like he kind of gets revenge, but he kind of doesn't, because it's like, is that a murder? Is that a kill? I mean, that's the other big thing is like this Batman does kill people, like indirectly in an action movie hero kind of way, where he like bombs the Joker's factory. But we are pretty sure that there's Joker people and other people there. He throws a guy down a pit.
you really have to take some real creative acrobatics to say that Batman does not kill a person in this movie.
No, he does, but I don't know. Maybe I'm limber enough for the acrobatics. I would just say that it's like the I don't think you're meant to think about it, which is strange. But I think it's like I don't. It's kind of like that daft movie producer logic of just like, well, we can't afford to bring Jack Nicholson back for a sequel, so we need to fire all the guns there. He can't survive this movie. It's only satisfying if the villain dies. If the villain dies and the hero kills him, therefore the hero is justified in killing the villain henchman. But for body count, I mean, it's like it's the factory and it's the Joker thug that's at the top of the bell tower. It's like only a few. Regardless, he does. He's a killer. He's killing people. It's a different take on Batman, a bit of a scarier one, and also it's interesting how it presents Batman's identity as a mystery kind of throughout the movie. Like, it doesn't confirm Bruce Wayne as Batman until like 15 minutes in or so. You're not 100% sure on who he is or why, and then the why is kind of teased throughout, as though we don't know Batman's origin, because in 1989 maybe you didn't. It was hardly mentioned in the 60s show. So it does seem like I kind of wish that they hadn't, it's very convenient that it's the Joker who killed his parents. And it seems like once the Joker's dead, why doesn't he just stop? It almost seems like they weren't confident that Batman would do well enough to justify a sequel, but that's insane, because of course they were counting on it being a huge, huge hit. Look at the marketing.
Yeah.
They knew that they're going to, so creatively, it's a frustrating choice to have the Joker be like, to have it be that 1-to-1 makes it feel like a limited, smaller universe. And it does kind of rob Batman of being able to do more with the origin in the other films in this series. But
I feel like it results in him going through his full arc in that one movie.
yes, yeah.
We'll get into this. They find an additional arc later on for him, but it's a bit of a train wreck. But we'll get into that.
Yeah. Anyway, I could talk about Batman '89 for a long time, clearly. But so tell me about what it was like when you watched it, and what were some of your thoughts?
When I went into it, the first thing that struck me, as you've mentioned, is the design. Like, Tim Burton really put his stamp on this. This feels as Tim Burton-y gets. Danny Elfman comes in swinging with his iconic score. It looks great. It sounds great. Visually, it mostly holds up. I didn't notice the set problems you were talking about, but now it's all I can think about. Problem, and this is a problem in so many Tim Burton movies, is that while the main actors all take everything dead serious, 100%, this is serious film movie making, for some reason, every supporting character is told to act like they're doing theater melodrama, and it's all just this weird, wildly over the top crap that's just super off putting, especially next to everybody who's taking this seriously.
You must be talking about Alexander Knox and the comical subplot of original creation Alexander Knox, who's investigating, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City? And if so, is he on the payroll? And if so, what's he pulling down? After tax. He's hamming it up. He's the comedy relief, I guess.
You get that sort of overacting out of him. I hate to say it, but you get that sort of overacting out of Billy D. Williams. Shame we did not get his version of Two-Face later on, but
yeah, it's he was supposed to be Two-Face in the second movie, but they ended up changing direction, and instead it became Christopher Walken.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that in a few minutes because I don't know any of the history here. That said, I really liked Keaton's Bruce. Wasn't a huge fan of his actual Batman. It seemed a little... You've kept mentioning his Batman scary. Visually, his Batman's scary, but when that Batman speaks, it's just like, I'm Batman. I don't feel anything coming off of that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I get... This is probably a result of the costume, but I get a lot more emotion and fear and worry out of his Bruce scenes. I mean, overall, it mostly worked. There's you get the full Tim Burton experience in this movie. There's some incredible design, great music, really sticking to it with those elements, but you get some real wacky stuff along the peripheries that doesn't work. And as you've mentioned, Nicholson's Joker really did a lot of the heavy lifting in this movie.
Yeah, he's definitely very dynamic, very compelling. I gotta also say too that I love the costume in '89. I know you can see the seams, but I just like the all black with the yellow gold belt and oval. Like it looks right. It looks like how it should. It's like, oh, that, and then it seems like they kind of lose that a little more. Like each time it's never quite as iconic again as it is in the '89 suit. And I even when they bring back the '89 character in the Flash, they still don't get the costume right. And the closest I think they've come to like a very nice, sleek looking outfit like this was the first costume that Kilmer wears in Batman Forever, which is called the Panther suit. But even that one is still a little too Schumacher-y, a little too like fetishistic for the like musculature of it. Whereas this is like, he's a weird guy who looks like Michael Keaton. So to scare people, he needs to dress up like a crazy bat. And he's got body armor and a cape and he's RoboCop. He's your worst nightmare. What is he? What is he, like some SEAL Team 6 guy? Is he like Super Cop? What's happening? Who is this guy? He's probably not real. He's a vampire. He's like, I like that Batman Bruce Wayne is sort of in the margins of the story, even more so in the next one in Batman Returns. But I kind of like that approach to it. And I've come to appreciate it even more as time goes on, as we've gotten more, I guess, comic accurate interpretations of Batman. This one being more unique, I think sticks out to me as having like a lot of fun ideas that the overall film series and comic series and just Batman in general could continue to incorporate, not least of which is just the all black suit. People are like, oh, I like the blue and gray suit because blue and gray suit from the old comics and the Adam West show and the anime series. Like, blue and gray has had its day. It's time for the all black suit to just permanently be the suit. That's what I think. So anyway, I love this one. Love it, love it, love it. It's a movie that is burned into my brain. I could probably quote it from memory.
This is your Jurassic Park to me.
Yeah, it is a weird movie, but it's hard for me to like see outside of the nostalgia goggles 100%. Because it's just so familiar, I guess. And, same with Batman Returns. Although Batman Returns is one that I've come to like even more as an adult. And
Is it because of how horny it is?
well, I do like the horniness, and I do like that it's like a Christmas movie. And so I've been more recently just kind of annually rewatching it around the holidays, usually in that period after Christmas and before New Year's, but sometimes before Christmas. Maybe this year it'll be on Christmas. I haven't done my rewatch yet, but it's a movie about, holiday blues and feeling lonely and isolated and like a freak. The Penguin is the main character, but Catwoman and Batman, they're kind of the tritagonists of the movie. They're at odds with each other, but we're following them on their own journeys and they each have their own goals. That's a movie that, famously, though it did perform well, it was it's a Christmas movie that came out in July. It's a movie that McDonald's was upset about because they were selling Happy Meal toys, and then parents were taking their kids to the theater to go see Danny DeVito bite off a man's nose, grope a young woman's breast, and then spew black bile into a pool of blood.
I'm sure this is not an original take, but I feel like the Always Sunny guys watched this movie and went, Frank Reynolds is what if this was an actual human being?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think it's crazy that Danny DeVito didn't win, or somebody should have given him an honorific for the performance, because I think it's like, man, there's a lot of makeup that he has to deal with, a lot of prosthetic stuff. He's a very freakish looking character, in the sense of like a circus act, which is part of his character here. And incidentally, another thing that I love too is that this is the first time that we've seen the Penguin anything like this. This is a total reinterpretation of the character who was, again, until this point, he was the Burgess Meredith 60s guy. He is, trick umbrellas, top hat, he's robbing the aviary for a ton of money to get an exotic bird. Like, it was always that sort of thing. And actually, the plot of Penguin running for mayor, which has ended up seeming increasingly prescient as politics have become more ghoulish in the years since. The plot of Penguin as mayor running against Batman was a 60s episode.
Wow. I that feels more viable then than it does in this movie. Like, you just mentioned that with the way politics have gone, Penguin doesn't seem that out there, but this is a man who's biting off the nose of his own employees in front of the news. This is a man who doesn't know how to public speak without saying something
some horrible thing. And I mean, Trump has kind of made it so that now it's almost kind of quaint that, when Batman plays the compact disc of Penguin's rude comments about Gotham and its voters, that they reject him and throw cabbage and tomatoes at him. But this movie and 89, they definitely feel to me as though the primary inspiration for Tim Burton was that 60s show. Like, there are some comic book things here, but it seems like it's in the way that Tim Burton has then gone on to do the Alice in Wonderland or the Dumbo movies, and it's like his reinterpretation of them with the Burton aesthetic. It's like these two movies feel like, okay, Tim Burton, you have Batman, and it's this show, but obviously do it in your sensibility, because there's a comedic, Batman Returns is very quippy. Every line is a joke.
It's a lot more quippy than 89.
Yeah, 89 has big punchlines for certain beats. The dialogue in Returns is the screenwriter is a different screenwriter than the first movie. This is Daniel Waters, who also wrote dark comedy called Heathers. And so I think they were looking to kind of give this movie more of an edge than 89 had. And it ended up being rejected for being too edgy. And so by Batman Forever, it's softened a bit.
A bit.
But yeah, maybe more than a bit. And Max Schreck is such a great villain. He's a vampire. He's not literally a vampire, but his plot is to suck up all of the energy is to create a power plant that siphons power from the city. That's funny. That's a funny thing to do. He's got his adult idiot son who's always rushing to be a human shield for his father. He's throwing anybody under the bus, always looking to make a deal. And then him being the political operative for Penguin.
He felt natural.
Yeah, he feels like a real like Gotham City character. But anyway, the two of them together are very like Trump.
And it was overall, I think I liked this movie less than 89, and it was entirely the horniness of it all that really got to me. I enjoyed the quippiness, but sometimes it was like some of it hasn't aged great to me, or some of the big things that they're like, this is going to be the coolest thing we've ever done, just feel a little cheesy today. Like, I specifically have here in my notes the opening thing. I imagine in 1991, sitting down in a theater, you see like 40 mirror bounces of light, and then Keaton sitting alone in a dark room, and the bat signal just lights up the room, and he turns and gets up, or whatever it is he does. Must have been the coolest fucking thing, like theater cheering, like Avengers Assemble here in 2019 or whatever going, but like, no, that didn't age well.
I mean, there's some clunky lines in there. What comes to mind is like Batman versus Catwoman in the abandoned apartment where the Ice Princess is tied up. She throws a whip at him and he grabs it. He says, "Eat floor, high fiber." Like that's just like a movie line that makes me wince a little bit.
It's not great.
It's kind of funny on the page, but it's not.
That's one of those things where
when you pay attention to it.
It's one of those things where you pause the movie and just let yourself live in that secondhand embarrassment for a second before you keep going.
But again, I gotta say, I love it. I love this movie. I love it. I love that it's a movie about being a freak. And again, Batman becomes more normal. He gets weirder for the next two movies, but then he's presented as like a normal guy, though. A normal guy who does this weird thing. And 89 and Returns are pretty keen on being like, he's a weird guy who's doing a very weird thing to stay somewhat normal. I would say maybe the Batman brings back the idea that he's not doing so well. But 89 and Returns live in that broth of, this is a guy who's pretty damaged and like kind of just going through life in this bizarre haze, and like probably is like having a hard time discerning between dream reality and regular reality. And so it has like a almost, I guess I want to compare it to Eyes Wide Shut, where it's in like this parallel universe with kink that's kind of coming out in strange dream-like ways. And again, I just like the bat suit, and I like the Batmobile, and I really like when Batman and Catwoman are doing their thing. I love Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as well. I think Michelle Pfeiffer,
really over the top, but it kind of works.
Danny DeVito and Christopher Walken are all doing great, fun Batman things. And to me, this is really kind of this is one of the ideal Batman tones for me. Is a movie with like a dark sense of humor, a weird heart. Like the movie's heart is kind of with the Penguin, which is strange. And so it's just a bit offbeat. Another thing, again, one last thing, sorry, is just that as far as the Batman being a killer here, everybody points to, the number one thing that people point to is like, okay, this Batman kills, is he is the circus strongman who he places dynamite on his belt and then throws him into a pit. It is then followed by the classic Wilhelm scream, the stock sound effect of a guy screaming. It's supposed to, I think, be cartoonish. It is a live-action cartoon vibe to Returns especially, and 89. In the same way that Edward Scissorhands and Pee-wee's Big Adventure feel like live-action cartoons. This is supposed to have that same type of logic. yes, if you think about it, that guy definitely is at least dismembered or dead.
But because we're sitting here in cartoon land, he's just going to be smoky.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to come up with his mustache that's all ash, and it's not really a death until the movie says, "Look at this body. This guy has died." And it almost always tries to let Batman off the hook because it's like just like how the Joker fell from a great height in the first one, and Batman kind of is responsible for it. Like he is.
They
but
show
like,
the body.
You could argue it.
In
They
that
show the
one.
body, and that's what I'm saying with Penguin here too. Did Batman strike the killing blow? Did he really? Was it his? Did he make? Did he do the killing? The movie is kind of waffly on it. So it's just an interesting thing. It's interesting because the Nolan movies make such a big deal about Batman not killing, but it has the same movie goofiness. Batman Begins is the one that is the most, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. Like, he has a no kill rule, but he also blows up the House of Ninjas, and he also kills Ra's al Ghul as much as he kills the Penguin or Joker or Two-Face in Batman Forever.
And
so
the no kill rule has always felt a little fast and loose overall. Like, we're not talking about the games, but like Arkham Knight in particular plays it real fast and loose with that.
It's so goofy. It makes no sense. You know, he's slamming guys' faces against bricks repeatedly in those games. The only time in the comics that really felt like it mattered that Batman had a no-kill rule was, I think, the Denny O'Neil era of editorial leadership, which was like the 90s and 2000s. And then really before then and since then, most interpretations of Batman are also kind of fast and loose with it. He doesn't kill because the Joker needs to keep coming back. But in the movies, the Joker is too expensive to bring back, therefore he does kill. And you don't want, and then if you leave it open, then it's like, well, then I guess this character has to keep coming back. And so they find ways to kill the villains. That's why. They kill the villains because they want to end that character's story. Anyway, tell me more about, just sum up my thoughts on Batman Returns. I love it. It's a weird psychosexual nightmare holiday horror fest that's fun for the whole family.
That's just such a wild take on it to me that it's everything you just said. Because to me, it's what if we took that Burton aesthetic and added more weirdness, added more horniness, added very creepy, unlikable characters to it, and gave Batman some general angst about things and called it a day. I think when I think back on this movie, I think back to a very innocent scene in the movie in the grand scheme of things, but it's like this is their attempt at Batman character development of him being like, do I have a place in this world? Of him just spying on Penguin, like doing family research or whatever. It's the like, I know he's up to something bad, but everybody thinks he's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Is everybody right? Am I wrong? No, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, that's just part of the Batman fantasy, isn't it? Like, everybody would say the Batman crusade is wrong and crazy, but he ends up being right because there's someone even crazier out there. And isn't it lucky and fortunate that Batman happened to be here when the Joker emerges or the Penguin emerges? Because otherwise, Batman should be locked up. He's a danger to himself and others.
And I'm sure there's a comic somewhere that I haven't read that explores that.
Oh, there are many. There are a fair number. So to try to appeal more to a Happy Meal friendly 4-quadrant, all accessible summer blockbuster, Batman Forever comes out in 1990. My memory says 95, and Wikipedia says 95. Yes, it came out as these did in June, which is when my birthday is. So it was always kind of like, all right, here we go, birthday time, Batman movie. Everything's great. Now this one was thrilling, very thrilling. So 95. I'm 9 years old. I'm old enough for this, and I'm old enough for this take, which is very, very live action cartoon. The Tim Burton movies are live action cartoons in like a fucked up short film kind of way. These are like Saturday morning cartoons. These are like some of the weirder episodes of Batman the Animated Series where like Batman's trapped in the kid's basement and the kids have to take down the Penguin. Like, what? I guess this is a cartoon. It seems like different from the one where he's helping the mob guy deal with the death of his son or something, but I guess it's the same show. And in that way, it's the same series. I guess it's the same continuity because Alfred is the same. Commissioner Gordon is the same. Batman's new. Got a new Batman. Michael Keaton's not here anymore. We got Iceman. We got a taller, more handsome, more broad-shouldered Batman now.
Who has absolutely no idea how to play Bruce Wayne.
Nope. He sure does not. And this was supposed to be the Bruce Wayne introspective movie.
But he's a great Batman.
Yeah. He's got the jaw for it. And he's pretty good at acting with his eyes, I think. He gets a lot of attention for his lips because this is also another horny Batman romance with Chase Meridian, Nicole Kidman. This was my introduction to Nicole. I can't think of a Nicole Kidman movie that came out before Batman Forever that I can even think of now. Certainly wouldn't have been aware of them. And then Jim Carrey, who was a known entity. So him, this real, like in the way that I mentioned that 89 Returns are the Burton versions of the 60s show, this feels like another reinterpretation of the 60s show with less of a critical eye towards it and more of a celebratory spirit of like, yeah, Batman should be colorful, campy, pop, and, goofy, like a little goofy, but with also, some bass notes, some serious undertones, which ends up, for the most part, cut around the Bruce Wayne journey of rediscovering his lost memories via his father's journal and sort of re-exploring his grief around his parents. I say re-exploring. None of the previous movies explored his grief at all. It just mentioned that his parents were murdered in front of him, and that would probably mess up a kid in Batman 89. In Returns, it's not a thing at all. And then Forever, it's reopening that wound in order to maybe let it heal better.
It's entirely in service of him learning to create a found family with Robin. Yes,
and that is the big thing here is, supposedly they went as far as casting a Robin in Batman Returns. It was going to be Marlon Wayans, and it was going to be I think it was going to be an original character and not but I can't remember if he was going to play Dick Grayson or if he was going to be an original character. Batman 89 had Robin in the draft at one point, and it was Dick Grayson. The Joker killed his family during a chase sequence. That gets cut out. Just no room for Robin in Batman 89. Batman Returns, it comes about again when it's Batman 2, and like I said, it went as far as not only Marlon Wayans being cast, but also, he's mentioned on like talk shows and stuff that he would still get residual checks for not playing Robin. They paid him out. I think similar to Billy D. Williams, got like I believe like he was contracted to play Two-Face at some point, and then they recast and went with Tommy Lee Jones, who also another like behind the scenes thing is like he hated working with Jim Carrey, hated it. He was a bully to Jim Carrey. Said I cannot condone your buffoonery, and then he tanked his performance as a result, trying to out buffoon Jim Carrey. I would say he fails at it. I would say it's Tommy Lee Jones's weirdest performance. Boy, you know who else is in it is Drew Barrymore as the Mall for the Harvey Dent side of the personality. This movie has a lot of moments that are weird, but one that comes to mind is the explanation of Two-Face's origin, which is just like a TV thing where we see that Batman was in the courtroom where a mob boss threw actual acid onto Harvey Dent's face, and he covered half of his face with a folder, but he blames Batman for not getting there in time. It starts with a very
Wasn't Batman in the courtroom?
Yeah, you see him in the courtroom jumping, trying to prevent the acid from being thrown. So he blames Batman rather than the guy who threw it. Okay, so Jim Carrey's great, I think, as the Riddler. Edward, who's the guy from the 60s show that played the Riddler? Frank Nashton. What are these names? Frank Gorshin. I almost had it. Frank Gorshin played the Riddler in the 60s show. Jim Carrey was emulating that for sure, adding his own comedic sensibilities. He's kind of doing the Joker.
There's a lot more physicality he added to it, which really works.
Yeah. Gosh, where to begin unpacking Batman Forever? It's got Robin, one of my favorite Batman characters. It does a pretty faithful, more or less faithful. I mean, it's not Two-Face, and it adds a brother. But, he's a circus acrobat. The Flying Graysons, Bruce Wayne is there. Family gets killed.
It's a very wacky death sequence.
It is.
I can't really say anything beyond it's wacky.
It is wacky. I'm trying to think if it's wackier than Batman the Animated Series. It's probably equally as wacky. Batman the Animated Series has like a sad elephant who like emotes sadly, which is pretty silly, but also played sad. And this is, has the sad sound effects. Also, who plays the mayor in that circus scene when Two-Face is asking for Batman to identify himself? It's a comedian whose name I just blanked on. So he's a comedian. Oh, George Wallace. George Wallace. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, just a random fact of Drew Barrymore's it. People you wouldn't necessarily think have been in a Batman movie have been in a Batman movie, and it was Batman Forever. And Chris O'Donnell, I think, is I thought he was cool as Robin as a kid. I liked that Robin suit. I thought it was cool that Robin was there. The Robin toy, interestingly, that came out around Batman Returns looked more like Marlon Wayans. Although his face was painted white, he had a flat top haircut, which some people are like, oh, well, that's because they originally modeled it on Marlon Wayans.
Maybe that's why he still gets residuals.
Could be. But okay, but so it's weird, right, that Robin is an adult. Like I forget how old the movie says he is.
I think he's 8. He's supposed to be 18 on the dot. Which is why it's not that creepy that he steals the Batmobile to go pick up hookers, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that is kind of the right age for Robin to be. People are like, oh, he's too old. Like, it doesn't make sense for Bruce to do it. But it's like, he's not that old. Like, he's still kind of a kid. He can drive, but that doesn't mean that he's able to, keep going and fend for himself. And I don't know. And I like that they kind of have a brotherly thing almost as much as they have a father-son thing, because of the age.
It's sort of
more
bit.
It's not quite like he's his kid. It's more like he's an older brother figure.
A little bit. I can see that as the hey, I'm your older brother. I've been through this. Shut up and listen to me. Which of course he doesn't do until later on, and that becomes the entire arc of the next movie. But we'll get.
Alfred's the instigator. Alfred brings Vicky Vale into the Batcave.
I love Michael Go's Alfred. This is my hot take for the entire podcast is it's Michael Go, best Alfred, best live action Alfred by far.
Wow.
Sorry Michael Caine, sorry Andy Serkis, sorry Jeremy Irons.
Yeah. A lot of great Alfreds. Yeah, he's the most he's the oldest seeming. I like that scene in '89 a lot when they're in the kitchen and he's telling stories about young Bruce falling off the horse. And he's got a funny sense of humor. He's definitely also the least CIA Alfred, because Michael Caine forward, it's all oh, okay, this guy's
seen some shit.
Yeah, he's been a spy. But this one, the Michael Go's version, Michael's version of Alfred is much more of now this guy who's been a butler his whole life.
He's charming, but he's extraordinarily manipulative, but in a charming way. So take that for what it's worth. But he's supportive in a manipulative way that's for the best result for everybody. Maybe he's seen some stuff, maybe he hasn't, but he does it all with a grin and a smile, and it's always for the best, and he's just so likable.
Yeah, he is likable. He's probably the warmest Alfred, I would think. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. By the time you reach the end of the Nolan ones, Alfred's kind of done. Jeremy
Yeah.
Irons' version is always salty, and Andy Serkis's version, we'll see where that goes. Back to Forever.
Yeah, Back to Forever. Another movie that so this movie that I think it gets kind of underrated. I think it gets lumped in with Batman and Robin as just like, oh, the Schumacher movies are bad. I think this one does a pretty good job of balancing the Burton tone with a lighter sensibility. And, people sometimes talk about Joel Schumacher like he doesn't know what he's doing. Like these weren't like carefully considered decisions. The man directed great movies. Falling Down is like a very haunting thriller comedy satire that's great. Like Schumacher's done great movies. I think that people are like, oh, they just didn't know what they were doing. Well, they did know what they were doing. They got too high on their toy supply.
I think there was definitely some major studio interference in this movie.
1,000,000%, 100,000,000%. Yes, that is that's what I see. I think if you can kind of shrug that stuff off a little bit, then you see like another unique take on the character and how he operates, and it's definitely much more focused on Batman's inner life and his world more so than the Burton movies were, which were pretty held Batman at an arm's length and to keep him in the shadows of the movie, which I liked. But this is a little more, not quite as intimate as the Nolan movies are, but this is more about how he relates to people close to him.
Do you think this movie would be much higher on people's ratings if they had somebody other than Val Kilmer?
That's a good question. Like if it had been George Clooney or Michael Keaton.
If it had been George Clooney or Michael Keaton trying to do those introspective stuff, or hell, let's wild card this all the way out there and say, what if it was Bale?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know. I think there's even like a couple of missing scenes that have a little bit more of the spooky Burton imagery, like the giant bat that he meets in his dreams to personify his Batman psyche. There's on-set photos of it online, but I don't. And I think actually, and then there was a scene too where like we see the after scene of Two-Face escaping from Arkham Asylum with like a dead doctor that he killed to break out of so he's like an established villain. Anyway, I guess I'll just say it's an underrated one. It is. If they had stopped there, if there was no Batman and Robin, I think it would still, I don't know if it would be, if it stopped there, it might be people's favorite of the Batman trilogy, even though it had like a different director, the Burton if it had been Michael Keaton, let's say, but Burton's not there. It's hard to get into the alternate history because it's like, it seems like there's such a package deal, but then, The Flash, Keaton's there, but not Burton. So if Burton's producing, Schumacher's directing, Keaton's Batman Forever does amazing, but after that, they can't figure out how to do a fourth movie, and the property stays dormant until Nolan. Then I think Batman Forever is, held up as like Batman Returns would be held up as the weak one, and it would be like, oh, Batman '89, Batman Forever, great. I don't know. How can that ever be proved right or wrong? But that's kind of my feeling on it. Is like there is a good movie here that gets a little looked past because the camp sensibilities are there from '89. They're in Returns, so it's not like it's goofier really. It's a little more overt with it. For a movie from 1995, like comparing to that era, it's still big budget blockbuster Batman on the big screen, baby, and I like it. I liked it a lot when I was 9. Revisited it as an adult, still like it. Is it in my top 5? No. Is it in my top 10? We'll see.
All right. I'd have this one rated pretty low on there because I just could not get behind Val Kilmer. The overall insanity of the piece kind of helped save it, but there was just plot holes left and right. I wasn't thrilled with Schumacher's decision making. It leaned too far, I think, into the camp for me. I think I would have liked this movie better if it was an animated piece, because some of that live action cartoony element felt too cartoony.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think that makes sense. And then Batman and Robin, 2 years later.
Whew. Yeah, it sure is a film that exists. It's great that we finally have an actor who's comfortable in both the Bruce and Batman role. But what on earth was everything else that happened in this movie? You have this Mr. Freeze done in a way that can only speak in puns. Like, I understand Arnold was leaning more into I'm gonna be a comedian at this time, but like, woof, it was bad. You
Yeah,
lean more into
it's
those,
bad.
yeah, you lean more into those 60 sensibilities. Which, when I was watching this, it did not click in my mind. They're like, oh, this is kind of a celebration of the 60s show. Like, you saying that has forced me to relook at some of these things. Like the opening sequence, Freeze makes an ice rink while Batman and Robin are fighting, and they click their heels together and ice skates come out of their shoes so that they can have a hockey fight. And I'm like, this is so stupid. But now that I think about it, in that this is a tribute to the 60s, I'm like, oh, this makes absolute sense. This, yeah, 10 out of 10, no notes. But wow, it is a mess of a movie. Sorry to Uma Thurman. She did not understand the role in any way, shape, or form. The writing is bad and nobody can save it. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah, it's real bad. And even as a kid, wasn't into it. I was 11 in '97, and I was bored by this movie. I wasn't hyped for it. I was into the Batman comics too. I was a invested Batman fan. But Batman and Robin looked like an embarrassment, and it also made at the time everybody kind of look back at, I think at least among the Batman fans, look at the whole previous films as like a mistake. Like Batman '89 would still get held up as like, oh well, that one was good, and that was Jack Nicholson and it's the Joker, and even that they screwed it up. They didn't get his origin right. Can't turn his head. So it was like that kind of feeling towards the movies versus like the animated series, which also had a theatrical movie that we'll talk about in a second, Mask of the Phantasm. This sort of cemented the like superhero movie as a bad idea, and it would stay that way for a little while, a couple of years anyway, until Blade or X-Men kind of. But they had to like restart. This was seen as such a wrong decision that it did sort of force a reckoning among the creative executive class, anyway, of how to approach making a movie based on a popular IP. The prevailing wisdom that came after it was, well, you need to be more faithful to it. But of course, this was faithful to a certain era of the Batman comics. The 50s, 60s comics are stupid. They're very stupid, and they have situations that are even more outlandish than Batman ice skating down the spine of a dinosaur statue or pulling out a credit card from Gothcorp that says it is extended through forever for an unlimited amount of money. It's just dumb. The nipples on the batsuit, the ice puns, Bane, Batgirl, and why is she Alfred's niece? Alfred's storyline is a bummer. It's not like a particularly insightful. Like, I like where its heart is at. I like where it's trying to go in terms of being able to accept death as a natural part of life.
It exists to give Arnold a redemption arc. That's it.
And for him to say, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, which is another one where you just have to pause, grab your knees, and wheeze. And just go, what am I doing? My life? Watching this dreck. Terrible.
He doesn't get his redemption arc in the end, though, does he? He gets put in a cell with Poison Ivy and murders her. Or it's implied he's gonna.
I don't remember. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. Like, oh well, they don't kill the villains. They could have. Maybe they should have. I don't know. I don't know how great it is to. Yeah, it's all pretty bad. It's pretty dumb. It's pretty tedious too. It's not particularly fun to watch as like a bad movie because it's you know
It's
it's
not
just
fun.
it's not fun.
Like, isn't there a fun little urban legend thing with this? Is that Arnold, like, every year rents from Warner Brothers the suit so that they can't destroy it or something like that?
That's the first I've heard of that, but maybe sure.
You heard it here first, folks.
So Batman and Robin is a real stinky piece of poo. It's even if you love Robin and Batgirl, and I do, it's not great. It's not fun. It's not cool. It's sad. It's just sad. George Clooney, I don't even really agree with you that he's a good Batman Bruce Wayne. I think he's the worst of the three from the first four like 90s movies. His head bobbles way too much, and I don't like his voice, and I don't like his bat suit, and I don't like his Bruce Wayne haircut, and I'm not feeling it. The Chris O'Donnell Robin arc is unfortunate, just a bummer. What a waste of a. The best part of the movie is the Robin suit, which is cool. It's the Nightwing suit, but painted red with a cape. I like it. It's nice. It's a good looking Robin costume.
It looks good, and then his entire arc in the movie is wasted on I'm horny and I know better.
Yeah, he is a petulant piece of shit, and is unfortunate that the last time we've seen Robin in a Batman film released theatrically, this is the last time we've seen Robin in costume as Robin.
Okay. I was gonna say, what do you mean you don't count the detective?
Yeah, I don't count the one half second where John Blake. Oh, you should go by your first name, Robin.
Damn, it is that Nolan reveal.
Oh shit! I guess he kind of is Robin. Is the top still spinning? Is the top still spinning? Okay, Batman and Robin. Is there anything new or insightful that we can say about Batman and Robin that hasn't been said a million times? I don't know. I don't feel like I have any more left in the chamber for it, other than to say it stinks.
I think I have movies lower than it on my list. I have one movie lower than it on my list, but it is.
I also have one movie on it lower than my. I wonder if you, dear listener, can figure out which movie Jack has at the bottom of his list that's below Batman and Robin, which one I have on my list that's below Batman and Robin, and is it the same movie? Well, you'll have to stay tuned next time, because in the classic Batman style, we're definitely going to do a cliffhanger, part 1 and part 2. But before we cliffhang, we should do Mask of the Phantasm, which had a very limited theatrical release, was much more of like a goofy movie situation where technically released in theaters, but mostly it was the home video that people saw it. At least that was the case for me. And yeah, it's freaking dope. It's great. It's like the best episode of the animated series. You get some Batman backstory into year one, romance subplot that actually kind of makes sense and has a twist and feels part of the story in a more natural way. Joker's there. Phantasm is a cool villain with a cool mystery. No Robin, no Batgirl. It's good. Yeah, it's Batman and Robin. It stinks. Batman and Mask of the Phantasm. It's good. It's a good one. It's in the upper half of my list.
I'll go out and say it's in my top 5. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I assume this is supposed to take place in the same continuity as animated series. It has the same art style, the same actors, etc., etc.
Yes, same.
But it's like a fun little standalone. You get the animated series universe, but because we're in theaters and not on the WB network or whatever it was in '92.
Yeah, Fox.
You get to be dark. You get to explore darker themes. People are allowed to die. People are allowed to swear and drink and smoke. And Batman gets laid, and they don't dance around it. There's weird times in the movie that Alfred walks in on Batman in the middle of the act with someone. It's a very predictable movie, and you know how it's going to end 15 minutes in, but that doesn't change the fact that the ride is fun.
It's got a standout scene of any of the films we've mentioned so far. None of them have approached the level of emotional. They don't. The other movies don't even really try for a beat as emotional as Bruce Wayne at the gravesite, begging his parents to like let him not have to go through with his vow anymore because now he wants to be happy and he's met somebody. Like none of the other movies really even try to reckon with the interiority of the character to like any sort of remote degree.
That scene really hit when I was going
Oh yeah,
through this marathon. In the midst of this marathon, my father passed, and so I'm still fresh and dealing with the grief as I'm watching that happening. And so scenes like that, I guess, really, I wasn't expecting an animated Batman movie to make me cry, but sure did.
for sure. Yeah, it's heavy. It's definitely like okay, so the way that Batman '89 handles grief, return, it's very a logical thing. It's like, oh, okay, that would mess you up if you saw somebody gun down your parents in an alley. And the Returns is just like it has like grief about the way that we exist in society or the world. Like it has grief about the modern capitalist world of things, but it doesn't get into specifics really about losing people and then forever. Tries a little bit to acknowledge that there is this grief in the center of the character, but mostly dances around it for Jim Carrey dancing
Much more
antics,
fun.
which is more fun. Batman and Robin with Alfred and his storyline tries to again raise the subject of grief as something that he must conquer, and then he is able to. And also, he doesn't lose Alfred anyway. So great. Not only did I accept death, but I didn't need to.
In the end, the stakes meant nothing.
But Mask of the Phantasm is like presented in a pretty intense way of like he's lost these people, he still thinks about them, cares about them, wants their approval, can never quite have it because he's arguing with himself, he's arguing with like a broken child version of himself. And there's a very very touching moment and a very emotionally intelligent and moment relative to the Batman series, I guess, but really just in general. It's a well done scene and probably the standout moment of the movie. I would say the beginning is also very, and well, there's a couple. There's a number of big moments in that. You know, the he's on the run from the police and he's losing his, he doesn't have the shirt and he doesn't have the cape and cowl. He uses that to like as a distraction, and it seems like he's about to be caught. And then she saves him in the car. That's pretty cool. As you mentioned, there's like a little bit of like saucy, too hot for Fox Kids TV things of you don't see, but you get the heavy implication that your main character favorite hero was having sex with a girl.
They bring the silliness back a little bit in the end once the Joker becomes a thing, and you've got this like miniature city getting bombed in a borderline like sort of fake kaiju fight thing going on, but it's still fun.
Yeah, it's still fun. It's definitely like more cartoony. It's a cool literal set piece. And then also it's again another credit to Mask of the Phantasm in this series of movies in the 90s is that it also has some interest in explaining the how Batman gets his gadgets. Another powerful moment is well, I was thinking of the Batmobile, but the powerful moment is he's putting on the Batman costume for the first time. We see that in the flashback. He was trying it just with a normal disguise, didn't do much. He had to find inspiration, finds it from the Batcave, puts on the costume. Alfred's like, oh my. So, I mean, really, it's just a guy wearing a hat with pointy ears, but in the universe, it must be pretty imposing because he's a big guy. It's definitely one of my favorite Batman movies. I think I may even have it ranked too low in my list, so maybe I've talked myself into raising it at least one. But even then, does it make my top five? I don't know. It starts to get. I will say that we have covered a good majority of the bottom half and 2 of the top 5. I'll say that Batman 89 and Batman Returns, they're in my top 5. I won't reveal exactly where they are, but they're high up for me. Batman Forever, middle. Batman and Robin, very low. Mask of the Phantasm, upper middle.
We have our similarities and we have our different. Yeah, we've covered. From out here, we've covered a lot of my middle. A lot of my middle and a little bit of my top and a little bit of my bottom.
That's where we like to leave them, tickling the bottom. That's it for The Void. This episode, we'll be back for part 2 of every Batman movie ever reviewed and ranked by us, the Void Boys. See ya.